This episode is brought to you by the American Homebrewers Association, a community of homebrewers and an essential source of brewing tips, recipes, and homebrewing culture. Visit homebrewersassociation.org and learn about all of the benefits of membership. That's homebrewersassociation.org. Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, January 10th, 2019. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. This week, it's the second Mead yeast sampler. This time, we taste a must split 3 ways and fermented with beer yeasts, US-05, S-33, and BE-134. If you go to basicbrewing.com, you can find archives of our audio and video shows, our DVDs, our brewer's logbooks, and other basic brewing gear, including our tie-dye silicone pint and our brewing rainbow shirt. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Basic Brewing and find our show page on Facebook. We have a cool Basic Brewing app on iTunes and Amazon.com, and we're found all over the place where fine podcasts are served up. And if you do us the favor of rating us on iTunes and maybe leaving a nice comment, they tell us that will help new listeners to find us. And if you want to support us financially, check out patreon.com/basicbrewing. And thanks to everybody who's helping out that way. If you go to patreon.com/basicbrewing, you can see a long list of stuff that you can access if you sign up as a supporter. Some of that stuff that you can get through Patreon, I released early this week. On Monday, I did an early release of a Basic Brewing video episode that I shot with my son, Drew, on how I've been brewing the small batches for the Hop Sampler series. It's a really easy process. It only takes about an hour for each small batch. That each batch winds up with a 6-pack of beer. And not only did I release the episode early, I also posted the recipe and a behind-the-scenes video for upper-tier Patreon supporters. The rest of the general public will see that episode on Monday, this upcoming Monday. It was fun involving Drew in the process. He's 21 now, soon to be 22. Hard to believe. And he's taking a more measured approach to beer drinking than I did in college, thank goodness. So he's still learning about the flavors and styles that he likes in beer and also learning about how to talk about them. So it'll take him a while to come up with, come up to speed on pointing out exact flavors that he's detecting. But I do hope that he'll hold on to his moderate approach to drinking as time goes on. There's no hurry to taste every single beer in the world. Great news for commercial brewers from our sponsor, Imperial Organic Yeast. Planning brew schedules just got easier. Imperial Yeast is guaranteeing that commercial orders of up to 20 liters of juice, flagship, and global are in stock and ready to ship within 24 hours, or shipping is free. I know that there are pro brewers who still listen to the show, and Casey at Imperial says that she's been hearing from you. So take note. Imperial will have your order of up to 20 liters of juice, flagship, and global ready to ship within 24 hours, or they'll include shipping at no additional cost. And for home brewers, we can still count on Imperial for the highest cell count of any liquid yeast producer at 200 billion cells. And that stuff takes off like a rocket, I tell you. My stir plate is dusty because I don't make starters anymore for standard gravity 5-gallon batches. And Imperial has top-notch customer service. If you call them, an actual human being will answer your call and take care of your questions. So I also love the Imperial packaging. It used to be in the little cans, which were cute, but, sometimes kind of difficult to deal with. But these new pouches, or they used to be new, not as new as they used to be, but they're super easy to pour from and open. And you've heard Steve Wilkes talk about how well taken care of the yeast is when it comes from Imperial. So it's going to perform well for you. Look for Imperial Organic Yeast at your local homebrew store. Or if you're a commercial brewer, get in touch with them at imperialyeast.com. It's imperialyeast.com. I love that stuff. Let's take a look into the mailbag, shall we? Keith writes in and says, I just recently came across your videos on YouTube that led me to your radio podcast that I'm now about 2 years in worth of podcast at this point, and I'm hooked. Whew, you got a long way to go there, Keith. A couple of weeks ago, Keith says, I went to the homebrew store to pick up my grains for the next couple of batches of brew that I had planned. I filled out the recipe order form online as I always have. When I arrived to the brew store counter to pick up my grains, I was surprised to see my grains in an old 55-pound grain bag. Didn't think much of it until I got home and opened the bag to separate and store the grains. Much to my surprise, all of the grains for all 3 batches are put into one bag. The kicker is the grains were for a double IPA, black IPA, and basic stout. So my question is, do you or any of your followers or listeners have any suggestions on what I should do with this assorted bag of grains? Well, thanks, Keith. Glad you found us. I'm assuming from the letter that everything was all milled and mixed together for all 3 of those batches. And to tell you the truth, I'd take it back to the homebrew store and have them do your order right. There's no need for you to sacrifice your brewing plans for a mistake at the store, and I'm sure it was an honest error. And if it's a good homebrew shop, as it most likely is, they'll be happy to make it good to keep you a satisfied customer. And I didn't say where Keith was from, not from around here, by the way. But, it happens, especially if you're, sometimes when you're ordering online and, not doing it in person, some things, so it could be a communications snafu there. So anyway, take it back to the store and have them do it right. I'm sure they'll be happy to do so. A while back, Mark from Huntley, Illinois, wrote in to say that he had some homegrown hops that had turned brown while they were still on the vine. And Mark asked if they'd be okay to use. Well, I told Mark that they probably wouldn't be good, but, just for curiosity, he could do a small batch experiment to test for sure. Well, he did, and he wrote back. Mark says, I made a small 1-gallon extract recipe and added what seemed like a lot of hops. The hops were added at flame out only and were removed after cooling the wort and racking to the fermenter. So it sounds like the recipe that we use for the hop sampler. Anyway, Mark continues, at bottling time, I noted the beer was skunky. I wasn't sure if this was caused by the bind-dried hops themselves or if it was because I used a 1-gallon clear glass fermenter in a room that gets good amounts of sunlight. Oh, either way, the finished product exhibited no skunky smell when I popped the bottle caps. Mark says, remember the previous email where I noted the brown bind-dried hops smelled fabulous? Well, this wasn't the case in the final brew. Here are my observations. Even with the amount of hops that I added, there's only a low key amount of smooth bitterness, not really any hop flavor, and no hop aroma. My opinion is these hops did not contribute much beyond subtle bitterness, so I can suggest not to use bind-dried hops. Well, there you go. Appreciate that, Mark. I appreciate your taking time to do the experiment. So there is evidence there that you need to harvest your hops before they dry up on the vine. So hard to do here in northwest Arkansas. The sun gets to them pretty early in the season, and they dry up easily. There are some other variables. I mean, with homegrown hops, you're not sure what you're going to get as far as bittering potential. So that is one variable to put into the equation. But why risk it? Take care of your hops and pick them when they're good and ready to go. Again, thanks for taking the time and effort to do that experiment, Mark. Here's a fun thing from the AHA. They posted an article this week on their website that has a clone recipe from commercial breweries in each state. So and the District of Columbia as well. So 51 recipes, commercial clone recipes from across the country, including Belgian Golden Ale from Ozark Beer Company here in Arkansas. That used to be in cans, but is now only available on tap at this point in time. One of my favorite go-to beers. So I may have to be brewing my own of that. You can find that article with all those recipes at homebrewersassociation.org. That's a little freebie tip. This. Let's talk about our sponsors, Desiree and Dave from High Gravity in Tulsa. And if you're thinking about starting your new year with a new electric system, listen up. Here's some incentive to get off the fence. If you're looking at a Warthog single vessel system like mine from High Gravity, now is the time to buy. As with a lot of things nowadays, prices are going up. However, you still have time to get a Warthog single vessel system and save a couple $100 before the increase. Desiree and Dave are holding the Warthog single vessel systems at current pricing until the end of January. So as they say, don't wait, act now. I love my single vessel brew-in-a-bag system from High Gravity. Brewing with it is so easy and predictable in all times of year. A new Warthog system from High Gravity will take the pain out of propane. And in addition to those, it's a couple $100 that you can save by jumping in now, you can still save an additional $75 off your electric brewing purchase by using the code EBC75BB. So don't wait. Head on over to highdgravitybrew.com right now to get a jump on that system, a single vessel system, before the price increase. That's highdgravitybrew.com. Okay, let's head back in time to taste the second in our series of the Mead Yeast Sampler. Well, Steve Wilkes, welcome back to Basic Brewing Radio.
Thanks, James. It's a pleasure to be back.
And I'm introducing you first because we're here in the back of your shop, Steve's Brew Shop.
That's right.
.com. And we have a recurring visitor, Mr. Jamie Conway.
How's everybody doing?
We're doing well. We're going to be doing better here in just a second, I think. And then a first-time visitor to the audio show, I think, is my son, Drew Spencer.
Good to be here.
All right. And Drew, we have in front of us a Mead Yeast Challenge. And you said that you had not had mead before.
That is correct. This is the first time in my memory that I've had mead. I might have had something a few months back that I don't really, it was probably completely non-noteworthy, but, here we are.
Well, here we are. And it's a challenging thing to differentiate between these three. Or at least the first round that we did. This is the second round of the Mead Yeast Challenge. And this is your baby. I brew up the hop samplers, and you've been doing the mead samplers. So what have we got going on here, Steve?
So what I did this time was instead of using 3 wine yeasts, we did the hop or the mead sampler with 3 beer yeasts. So the must is a 3-gallon volume. In other words, it's 2 3-gallons. But I used 9 pounds of local Arkansas honey, topped up with 2.23 gallons of filtered water, which gave me 3 gallons of must. Let's say I treated the must with a teaspoon of diammonium phosphate or DAP and a teaspoon of the L.D. Carlson brand of yeast energizer. So that's what's in the must. The original gravity is 1.110, so it's pretty big. Mm-hmm. I broke that 3-gallon must into 3 1-gallon batches, and then I treated each one with a different beer yeast. So one of the 3 uses, they're all Fermentus, by the way. I used Fermentus S-05, the standard American ale yeast. I used S-33, which is a British ale yeast, said to be not very flocculent and rather estery. And then I also used a Belgian BE-134 Saison strain. So the idea is to get some sense of what these 3 yeasts do to the mead. I like using beer yeasts in meads, and I was really interested in what the differences would be. I happen to use the Fermentus strains just because they're so common. They're kind of ubiquitous around the country, and they're handy, and they're dry, and I could pitch a small amount into the 1-gallon batches. So, and when I pitched the yeast, I didn't have a way to measure the yeast, and so I will admit to eyeballing about a half a packet per gallon. So that's the only variable that might be in it otherwise.
And did you notice any difference in the fermentation process between the three?
I did. Actually, there was quite a bit of difference. The BE-134 fermented most quickly, most aggressively, and cleared the quickest. Huh. The S-33, as it's described, was the least flocculent of the three at first. In other words, it kind of hung out and was kind of cloudy for the longest period of time, though it fermented rather aggressively. It fermented rather quickly. And the US-05 actually was the longest, slowest ferment. It took the longest to finish out. And they were all kept in the exact same environment. I mean, literally right next to each other the entire time. So environment wouldn't have changed on them. Once they caught up to one another in terms of flocculation, they all appeared to be relatively the same. In other words, they all cleared nicely. I did, after I was convinced that fermentation was complete, I did stabilize them with some potassium sorbate and potassium metabisulfite so that they're stable, they can't reignite. And then I racked them off into a secondary fermenter for about a month. And so they sat in that fermenter for about a month until I packaged them. And I didn't have time to bottle them per se, like in a wine bottle like I normally would. So I just packaged them up in 3 1-gallon growlers and put a good lid on them, and then immediately put them into my refrigerator. So knowing that if there's anything that could go wrong with these, in my opinion, it would be a slight amount of oxidation because of the headspace that's in the growlers. I wasn't able to do much about that, but I was very careful in how I transferred them, and they went immediately into a cold fridge and haven't been out of there until we just now took them out.
Very nice. Now, I guess we should go ahead and talk about the finishing gravity numbers between the three while we're at it.
Yeah, I was really surprised at how low they finished. So they started at 1.100. The S-05 finished at 1.004. The S-33 ended exactly at 1.0. And the BE-134 ended at 1.002. Now, I would say that using a hydrometer and you're out to the thousandth of a percent, it's, my eyes could have tricked me a little bit. But basically, they all really finished right at 1.0. So, but according to the math, the US-05 would be 12.5%, the S-33 would be right at 13%, and the BE-134 would be also right at 13%, 1284. Again, we're in pretty high rarefied territory for beer yeast. So the thing that surprised me the most at the moment was how strong they are. Yeah,
the alcohol tolerance. I think it was a fruitcake barley wine in the past where I used a US-05, and it got up to like 12.5% alcohol. So, with that knowledge, it doesn't surprise me that it got this far down. Although, a beer wort and a mead must, they're two different animals. So it's kind of surprising to me, I guess, that all three of these, finished so low in gravity.
Yeah, it was to me too. I was expecting all of them to end up around 10% rather than around 12 to 13%. But when you taste them, you can tell they're 12 to 13%. What do you think, Jamie?
Same. Yeah, I'm actually surprised that they didn't, some of the yeast didn't go into shock with that high of an alcohol level, especially when you're just doing a straight pitch. I know a lot of times something like that is recommended, a starter even, and, straight pitching something like that, I'm surprised it even took off.
So what's your background with mead?
Drinking Steve's Meads when I've done podcasts with you guys. Not a whole lot. I've never made one. It's on my list of things to do, but I prominently stick to beer.
Well, there you go. And so if we're just looking at and this is a blind tasting, so we've got the jugs labeled 1, 2, and 3. And did Chase do this?
Yeah, Chase, my son set up the blindness of it so that I can't know what they are either. So he labeled the jugs, and then he put the key into a mayonnaise jar.
Literal.
Which has been on Funkin' Wagnall's porch since noon Wednesday.
There are 3 envelopes with numbers on them.
Yeah.
So we don't know. We don't know what these are. Just looking at them, what do we see appearance-wise, Drew?
Well, 3, which is the one closest to me, I think is the lightest from my perspective, from my position. I thought 2 was the darkest. I did have a little bit of discussion whether or not 1 or 2 was the darkest. I think it's 2 from what it looks like in the cups here, and 1 seems to be a good in the middle. Mm-hmm. So this will be interesting to see how the flavor correlates to each of the darkness levels.
Yeah, in the and I should take a picture before I forget. But in the glasses, it's once they're poured, it's hard to check the difference between the 3. But in the jugs, where you've got a bigger volume to look at, it is apparent that 1 is lighter than the other 2, especially the number 3 is lighter than the other 2. And I'm not sure why that would be. And oxidation is one possible clue, but or cause, but these have been treated exactly the same.
Yeah, and I would say that I noticed the color difference all the way through the process. So, and I don't remember which is which. So, but I definitely noted a slight color variation all the way through from the time that I considered fermentation to be done.
Just a little question here, since I have no idea how the mead process works pretty much at all. About how long did this whole thing take from start to finish?
Good question.
Of course, I didn't write a date down on my notebook, but I put them up around Thanksgiving. Okay. A little bit before Thanksgiving is when I started it, and they've been in the 1-gallon growlers now for about a week.
Okay.
And been in the fridge for about a week. So, the fermentations. Actually, a lot of people assume that mead fermentations just take forever and ever and ever, and really they don't. I mean, they really move along pretty quickly. The fermentation temperature was right at 68 degrees. It was in my little fermentation closet I've got, and it stays pretty constant in there. I keep the door shut, and it's always about 68, 69 degrees in there. This time of year, in the summer it's a little warmer, but this time of year it keeps about there. So I felt like the fermentation temperature was really good on it, and so there's that.
And we should say that we're recording on January 3rd, so do the math at home. Yeah. So let's start with sample number 1. These have been sitting out for a little while. Cheers, everybody.
Cheers.
We're clinking our plastic cups here. Let's take a little sip. Oh, that's tasty. Who wants to go first?
Well, I'll go first. I think number 1 is really nice and light. Actually, quite like it. Comparing it to the 2, I think it has the cleanest or the least hot flavor. I think the other 2, I don't really want to spill the beans on the others, but this one doesn't taste hot to me at all. So I don't know what you guys will think, but that's my impression of it.
Jamie?
I get a little heat. It's definitely, it's got a dry finish to me, and definitely get a nice honey flavor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a nice, delicate honey flavor.
Yeah, I'd say light honey flavor, and goes down easily, I would say. Nothing that I don't have anything new to give that Steve or Jamie have already said, but yeah.
Yeah, it's nice and clean. There's certainly no defects at all in it. It's nice, drinkable, which I've been using that way too much lately. But it is nice and quaffable. That's another version of the same word.
Thesaurus.
Yeah, where's that thesaurus? Well, I can still say it. The honey character is delicate, I would say. Is that a good adjective?
Yeah, but I mean, you definitely know it's there. But yeah, I think that's a good description.
And we should say that these have not been back sweetened. On the first round of yeasts in the other experiment, you did back sweeten those, but you chose not to back sweeten these. I guess in theory, you could. They're still in the jugs. You could still back sweeten these.
Oh, sure, yeah, I could do anything I want with them, for that matter. But I mean, yeah, I could back sweeten them. I could flavor them. I could rack them onto some fruit, I suppose. I mean, I could do about anything with them, but I had hoped to kind of overwhelm the yeast, leaving quite a bit of residual sugar behind. So anyway, but they're stable in what they are.
Yeah, but you fed the yeast well, and I guess you aerated well, and you took care of them, and they did their job.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
They were certainly happy, and there were certainly enough of them. I mean, really, for a 1 gallon batch, half a packet of yeast is a lot of yeast. So,
Yeah, it is. Well, I'm kind of the Ricky the Mead Maker's philosophy of just a lot of yeast. Definitely works.
Yeah, yeah. Are we any other thoughts on number 1 before we?
I would say visually, it's on the darker of the spectrum, and to me, it looks possibly the clearest.
Okay.
I kind of agree with that. Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay. All right. Number 2. I'm getting mixed up because my jugs are backwards here in front of me, so I'm reading from. We're on opposite sides of the table. Cheers on number 2. Cheers. Yep. Okay. It is different.
Yeah.
I'm getting more of the honey character on this one.
Agreed. Definitely more of a honey. More of a honey character. I do think it's darker, so that might have something to do with it. But yeah, I think it goes down easily again, at least for me. And I think that's all I have to say about it, really.
I think it's got a little heavier honey flavor. The honey flavor is a little rounder. So the first one has a nice light kind of, light white wine-ish kind of honeyness to it, where this one's a little heavier, a little rounder, a little more luscious maybe in the mouthfeel. So the difference between maybe a light ale and a big strong ale kind of in terms of mouthfeel to me.
I depicted this a little different because I actually thought white wine was one of the first things that came to my mind with this. Definitely a little bit fruitier than the previous, and a little bit sweeter, and to me, a little bit smoother than the first one.
Yeah, I go with that. I mean, it's interesting because the first one is so light and kind of delicate to me that, I don't know where I was headed with that, except for I know what you mean. This one, there's a definite difference. The yeast really plays differently in this same mead.
For sure.
I get the honey to me is less floral and more kind of fruity. Like maybe it's my imagination playing tricks on me, but I'm thinking like maybe a strawberry fruit or something like that. Is it anybody else get anything like that?
To me possibly, but like it almost reminded me of like I said, white wine or even a beer that might have that vibe you get from like Nelson Sauvin, that kind of grapey, white grape wines of Zinfandel kind of taste. It's just the first perception that hit me.
Yeah, I could go with that. Yeah. I could be talked into anything at this point.
Pretty much.
Ways to go.
That's the danger of these tastings is you get a consensus after a little while. Okay, so we won't talk about preference yet.
Nope.
But okay, here goes number 3.
Number 3.
Cheers, everybody.
Cheers.
That's different again.
Yep.
Jamie, you want to go first this time?
Yeah, that one's really good too. Get a lot of honey without giving away too much of where I think the yeasts are. That one definitely might have a little more wilderness funkiness that I'm perceiving. But very, very good, and it's just amazing how much different all 3 of these taste.
Yeah, they're a lot different, and you're right. This one to me is the most. There's kind of the most going on. There's a lot of different layers of flavor there.
Complexity.
It's very much more complex than the other 2.
Yeah, it's weird to me because you'd think lighter color would mean like a lighter flavor, like there's less there, but and that's definitely not the case. It's actually quite the opposite. There's, as Steve said, a lot of layers there. Like I had a bit of trouble kind of discerning what I felt was in there, I guess.
I'm getting pepper.
I was going to say, this one almost seems the most whiskey-like.
Huh.
In other words, I kind of get some pepper. I kind of get some, almost a little vanilla. I kind of get those kind of complicated flavors like you'd expect in bourbon, though it's not as bourbon-y. But I get a lot of different flavor notes coming out of this one, way more than the other two. And this one, again, and so when I said hot earlier, to me this one is the most phenolic. I can really, it's like I can really tell the alcohol in this one. The other two, to my palate, not quite so much. They don't seem so burny or hot to me. But this one, I'm like, okay, that's alcoholic. That's bruteful.
I'm getting the phenolics, like you said, but in a good way. I think that it's a peppery, it's a spice, it's a characteristic that, to me, it's not. None of these, to me, I would say, are hot to my palate, as in disagreeably alcoholic. You know, it's not like a high alcohol hotness.
Right. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Because sometimes when you say the word hot, then it's a derogatory term that means you didn't ferment it right. It was fermented too hot, and that's not really what I mean. This is the most whiskey-like.
Yeah, I'm not scrambling for a water fountain or whatever.
Yeah.
Or a cracker or something like that.
Right.
Interesting. Any more thoughts on number 3?
No, it's well done. Again, of the 3, it's to me the most complex. Like we've already said, with the most going on, and I think it's the most interesting.
Yeah, and the honey still is in there, so it's not all just phenols and pepper. The honey still is in there. It's just not at the front of the stage like it is on the other 2. Yeah. So it's interesting. I've got some opinions.
Well, I do too. But that's for later at the club.
So should we make a guess? Who wants to make a guess on number 1?
I'm pretty sure that's the S-05.
Let's find out, shall we?
Oh no! Wait a minute. Let's vote all the way around here.
We're going to. I'm just opening the
Okay,
jug.
and Drew, you may not know enough about the predicted yeast characteristics.
I've got no idea.
You get a buy on this one. You get out on this one. I agree. I think number 1 is US-05. It's the cleanest of all 3, which is kind of what you expect. You expect the US-05 to get out of the way and be nice and clean. What do you think, Steve?
I got to go with that. Yeah, it's what I expect.
And what would you think on number 2?
I think number 2 is the S-33. Everybody's nodding their head.
That's the English one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. For sure, it's the most fruity estery
Yep.
of the 3. So I mean, that was the one right out of the gates, or at least out of the first 2. I was like, all right, I know what this is, until we got to 3.
And then that leaves the Saison yeast, the BE-134 for number 3.
Same.
Yeah, I think it's the most interesting, the most kind of Belgian-y. You expect all those estery, interesting characteristics.
No, it's just be all wrong.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, Drew.
I will completely.
You get to, since you didn't guess, you get to be the arbitrator here.
I'm totally not going to Steve Harvey this.
Number 1 is
US-05.
Hey, 1 for 1. All right.
All right.
So far, so good.
2.
Number 2. And the winner is. As I
Right.
tear open these envelopes.
Need to put them to your forehead.
Oh dear.
Well, I need to show you some Karnak clips on YouTube.
Oh, this one's having trouble getting out.
You can tear them.
You're right.
Yeah, we're not saving the envelopes for later.
All right.
Number 2 is.
Is S-3378?
Hey, there you go.
Look at us.
There,
Wow.
and just to confirm, rip open
Yeah.
number 3, but just so Chase didn't throw us a curve.
Right.
This one says, "Be sure to drink your Ovaltine."
It's a commercial. And yep,
BE-134.
BE-134.
Well, I'm
Wow.
relieved that finally one went as expected. Because usually we're like, oh.
Yeah. Yeah, one is like, I'm darn sure about that one, and it's not, So, wow. These are, it's interesting. I am impressed and relieved at the same time that these were as different as they were, and that this wasn't as difficult as some of these things are.
When we were sipping before we started, and obviously then not knowing, I was pretty sure that number 2 was the the English one, and the other three I was kind of going back and forth until, we really got into it. But that was I thought that one was the most prevalent of, picking out. Right. Even if I didn't know what was here, right. I would have been able to, pick that one out maybe.
So what do you guys think about, are there reasons to use any one of the three at any different time? In other words, number one, the US-05 is very light, and I thought really kept that kind of light at the top of the palate honey flavor. So if you like that, then it might be the best choice. Mm-hmm. But if you like the way more complex, and funky is not even really the right word. It's just a lot more complex flavor,
more
spicy than the BE-134, and I guess maybe something in the middle would be the S-33. I don't know.
Well, I guess it might depend on what kind of honey that you have,
yep.
And then if you're going to use any spices or adjuncts with it.
Yep.
Like I think a pepper, something with some peppers would be really interesting with that. With the BE-134, I think that would, spice up those peppers even more. Whereas if you want to have something that shows off the fruit more, maybe the English one.
Yep.
And then maybe if you just have a beautiful, delicate honey that you want to show off, maybe the US-05.
And what I keep going back to is I make a lot of hazy IPAs, and London Ale-3 is typically like the go-to yeast that shows off the fruit, and that's kind of what I've keep going back to on the English ale.
Yeah.
I mean, the fruit characters really shine, I think.
Do we have favorites, Drew?
I'd have to go with two. One was a bit too light, and I think 3 was kind of more, I hesitate to say confusing, but it was more kind of like...
aggressive, maybe?
Yeah, I would say so. It kind of not really assaults your senses, but, it's more... 2 is more enjoyable, I would say.
Okay.
I think the BE-134 is my favorite because of the complexity. I don't dislike any of them, so I'm kind of splitting hairs. Mm-hmm. I was a little bit afraid that they might have tasted oxidized or kind of odd. I don't know if you guys think that. It won't hurt my... Okay, good. Because I don't think that, but it wouldn't hurt my feelings if you did. I was a little bit worried about that, but I think that they're all three nicely done. Mm-hmm. But I prefer the complexity of the BE-134 the most.
I would agree. 2 and 3 were my top 2, but I think just how interesting 3 is, it kind of made it stand out a little bit more.
Well, I think the third one, BE-134, is fun and interesting, but if I were to sit down and drink a full glass of it, I think I would go with Drew and do the English ale yeast, because I think it plays the best it brings out the character of this particular honey the best, just for my palate. I mean, they were all, like you said, it's splitting hairs because they're all delicious. I think you did a good job, and the yeast did a good job, and it's good honey. So they're all three good, and I wouldn't turn down either one of them. But at this moment in time, I like the English one.
Yeah, I think I wouldn't disagree with you. That's a weird thing, is that I kind of like them all for a little bit different reasons. Mm-hmm. Maybe I'll get industrious and get these into a bottle, and we can come back to them in 6 or 8 months and see how they've done.
Yeah. Sounds like fun. Yeah. Well, thanks, guys.
Thank you, James.
Thank you.
I'd say this is the best mead I've ever had.
Well, there you go. Film at 11.
Yeah. Da-da-da.
Cheers, everybody.
Cheers.
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 Thanks again to Steve for brewing up this experiment, and thanks to Jamie and Drew for taking part. We recorded another fun show after that with 5 beers brewed with monster cereals. Not exactly the most timely show topic, but it sure was fun and tasty. Halloween is it's a state of mind, just not something on the calendar. If you have brewing questions, show suggestions, or just want to say howdy, write to James at basicbrewing.com, or just fill out the contact form on basicbrewing.com. And please don't forget to tell us where you're from. Thanks to everybody supporting us through our Patreon page. Special goodies coming your way. Check all that out at patreon.com/basicbrewing. Be sure to check out our DVDs, Extract Brewing and Partial Mashing, Stepping into All Grain, Low-Tech Lagering, All-Tech Lagering and Decoction Mashing, and Introduction to Wine Kits. find them all on our site. You can get a free Basic Brewing bottle opener with any DVD combo, and you can check out our Basic Brewing shirts in the store, too. You can find our logbooks. We can track and log up to 50 batches of beer. Check all that out at basicbrewingshop.com. That's all until next time. Until then, thanks for listening, everybody. I'm James Spencer. Production help for Basic Brewing Radio and our website is provided by Kelly Dotson. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voicing. We'll talk to you next time, everybody. So long.